right, well, welcome to our talk on sex trafficking, human trafficking, and keeping our kids safe online. We have Fierce Freedom here tonight. We have Kat and Chris, and they're going to be our presenters. So I'll let them do a little bit more introduction and educate us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Penny. This was one of those things where we had talked about doing this presentation since I think before COVID. Like this is the result of several email exchanges back and forth. So we're really grateful to be here. We're happy everyone's safe and healthy, and that we can just chat more with you today. So again, my name is Kat Morgan, and this is Chris Page. You'll hear a little bit more from him later. And so I'm the community program specialist for Fierce Freedom. And so what I got to do is chat more and have conversations with individuals like yourselves and just really talk about the reality of human trafficking and what it looks like. And also we want to walk away from this like talking about the problem, which can be really scary and it can be really intense. And I'm really glad that you're all here and thank you for coming. But we also want to end on hope, and we also want to end on solutions. So that's really important to us, that we want to offer you maybe let's talk about what that looks like going forward. Taking the knowledge that you've learned today and kind of what is that action step going to look like for you to be empowered to make that change. I'm going to go to the next slide. And so we at Fierce Freedom, we work to end the cycle of human trafficking and exploitation, and we do that through educational programming that empowers communities and speaks to the worth and dignity of each individual. So this is really key here. A couple pieces of this are that educational programming. We want to prevent trafficking before it ever starts. We want you as a parent or a teacher, educator, or you as a student to think actively through this. Like, what would this look like in my life or my child's life? How can I create an environment at home where my children feel that they have worth and dignity, hopefully every day? Because one of the biggest lies that a trafficker is going to use, it is a core identity belief, is to really, for their victim to believe that they have no other value other than what someone will pay for them and what they, if they're willing to put that out there. And so it's so key that we are creating these environments where each person growing up in that is able to think, no, I don't agree with that because I have this worth and value intrinsically in who I am. And even if this person's saying I'm damaged goods for what I did, I know I can always go and find my safe person, my parent, my counselor, my teacher, whoever that safe person is. That's just so vital and so important. And that's how we're really going to see a culture shift. So that isolation that a lot of youth or individuals feel that are being groomed, we just want to totally take the mask off of that and just really reinforce that you're not stupid for getting involved in something like this. The trafficking and grooming process is designed to really target vulnerability, and they prey on people that they think that they can really groom into it, and they are really invested in that. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about just trafficking in general, but also kind of focusing as well on that online safety piece, because the idea that we're safe behind a screen is a complete fiction. I think it gives us a false sense of security. But even in 2020, when the pandemic hit, child enticement went up 97%. So that is really substantial and staggering. And so we can learn from that, and we can think, okay, the predators are going online. How can I help insulate, and how can I help combat that within, again, my child's life, my life, whatever that looks like. The next one. So again, just a little bit more about Fierce Freedom, and please check out our website as well if you're, some of these educational handouts, all available on our website for download. So last year we were able to reach 11,556 people, and this was through speaking events like this, videos, and podcast episodes as well. So, and again, we're all community-based support. So we are an NGO, we don't get government funding, we just receive grants, and it's because our community believes in us, and so we're really grateful that we can continue that work. We've also educated over 75 at-risk youth in the juvenile justice system through our Empower Youth program. So those are a lot of times the kids that have had interactions with maybe foster care, they've been in juvenile court, so they may have committed petty crime, and their life is on a trajectory that they may become part of the trafficking triangle. And so we want to disrupt that. Like I mentioned, we're really about that prevention work. So it's kind of laying that framework for trafficking not to thrive, but for empowerment to thrive. And so we've also been able to identify over 100 local victims of trafficking and worked with several as clients as well. So this is just a good little check-in point for everyone here, and there will be a little survey at the end. And it's just to kind of think to yourself, how much do I feel that I know about human trafficking on a scale of 1 to 10? And no judgment here, you don't have to say your number unless you want to, but what does that look like? So 1 being low, 10 being I know a lot, I feel very well versed in it. So what do you know about human trafficking? What does that number look like for you? And really the goal of today is for that number to go up. We really just want you to gain awareness and, again, like I said, empowerment for you to feel really a lot more confident that you'll think, okay, what is that action step going to look like for me or my family? Maybe it's a couple action steps, but we really want you to feel confident in that number as well. So just a couple of stats too about human trafficking. Oh, sorry. I said, Chris, you have to take pictures of me because I never take pictures of myself because I'm always presenting and I don't have any with me. So just generally speaking, human trafficking, even though it can feel like, it's definitely happening in those metropolitan areas like Milwaukee, which is very true. Milwaukee's actually been named the Harvard of Pimp School. Some have called it that. And it's really where you can learn the trade of how you traffic or enslave people, like modern day. But it has been reported in every county of Wisconsin. And also geographically, if you think about the 94 corridor, that's very highly traversed as well. So you have Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, Twin Cities, right? So that's basically, a trafficker is often going to be traveling from place to place to place. They're in their car a lot, and they're transporting victims a lot. And part of that is to evade law enforcement. You don't want to have too much going on in one place at a time, so you're going to move to the next city. It's also, again, demand that's in those bigger cities. So it could even be something that is happening where somebody maybe from a smaller town is getting recruited into it, and they may be transported even across the country, like places like Las Vegas, where Nevada has legal brothels, huge hub where trafficking is going to be happening in our country. But again, those Midwest kids or Midwest, women, boys, it's almost seen as like marketable. And I hate to say that word, but it's something, it's kind of new. So a lot of times they will be transported to a larger city or something like Las Vegas. But it has been reported in every county, and a lot of times it is going to be something that can happen online. A lot of this can take place online. And we will show you a video, a little bit later that really shows, we really wanted to do a picture of what it would look like for someone from their bedroom. They don't have to be transported to a big city. That can be what it looks like, but it really can start and begin from a child's bedroom as well. So yeah, and the other kind of perception I think a lot of people have is that trafficking always has to have money exchange. That's not true. There can also be the use of a car, cigarettes, especially when there's a minor who can't get their hands on cigarettes. They might, trade that for, they may have their girlfriend or boyfriend, and they may trade that for someone older to get cigarettes or drugs. And money, again, can also be exchanged, but that's not the only thing. And then some of those perceptions as well that Hollywood tells us are really that, has anyone ever seen That Would Be Taken? It's been on TV a lot, yeah. So this is a movie where Liam Neeson has to go and kind of go to Europe and get his daughter back because she's been abducted by traffickers. And while that's probably more what it does look like in Europe, like that's not like it never happens. The story really isn't that way as much in the US. A lot of the abductions that happen, so most of trafficking is going to be someone that they know, the individual knows, that has sort of groomed them into thinking that they are a safe person. When we're talking about abductions, that's typically, or kidnapping, a lot of times it's actually usually a parent that doesn't have custody of that child who takes them, or takes them on the day that they shouldn't have them or whatever. So a lot of times that's what that abduction number comes from. Largely, like I said, it's more complex than that. It's something where the child or the individual, it's like they're complicit in it because they trust this person, or that person has some control over them, or some coercion there as well. And then the other side of it is Pretty Woman. So some of you guys are probably too young to know about this movie, but it came out, I think, in the 90s. And again, it has Julia Roberts, Richard Gere, and there's this sort of picture glorification of prostitution, and that it's something that you can get out of if you want to, and it's just a temporary situation until something better comes along. Again, that's not a complete picture either. When you get into this life, it is extremely hard to exit this life. And there's a lot that can happen to you along the way. So we won't get into all of that, but again, there should be somewhat of a cautionary tale there, but Hollywood has this perception that it's either an abduction or it's just always a choice. So that's kind of what it looks like. And then the trafficking triangle. So I don't know if anyone's ever taken fire safety training. This is kind of what helps me. So just like fire needs oxygen, heat, and fuel in order to create massive damage, think of it this way. The trafficking triangle, you need the demand, which is the buyer, the distribution, which is the seller, pimp, or trafficker, and then the supply or the victim. Now, I want to ask you, who do you think in this scenario has the most power, arguably the most power? Can you repeat what you said? The buyer. Yes. Get it out of the park. You can think of it this way: when if people stopped buying iPhones, they would stop making iPhones. So clearly, unfortunately, there is a market for sex, and for underage sex even. So that's just the reality of it. So this got a little messed up, I think. But we can look at vulnerability as well. So who is vulnerable? So these are some risk factors and vulnerabilities to victimization. And again, vulnerability is not a bad thing. Vulnerability could be classified as if you don't have, if it's cold outside and you don't have a coat, you're vulnerable to the cold. With those really obvious vulnerabilities, that is unfortunately what a groomer or a trafficker is going to kind of hone in on immediately. That's what they will look at. So we can kind of classify that too as societal, individual, and relational. So an example of a societal factor would be maybe somebody that is dealing with homelessness. So maybe a runaway youth could be an example of that. So even when I mentioned we've been in juvenile detention, I've had youth in there that will self-identify as basically being trafficked. But they don't realize it. They just say, oh, I had to sleep with my friends so I could stay the night, right? And so that's sort of something that, again, they're not going to have the vocabulary for, but you as the person that's more informed knows that that's what's happened. And anytime also that somebody is engaging in underage sex commercially, it's always going to be sex trafficking, like always. So even the word child prostitute, we just would not say that. That would be a trafficked youth. And then if there's a level of coercion there that we can prove, then that would also be considered trafficking for like an adult. An individual risk factor could be a substance abuse. So someone that is possibly experimenting with drugs or alcohol, that could be something that a trafficker and abuser will introduce to them for the first time if they're curious about it. Or if they already, again, have that addiction, it's just going to be something that they can use to control them. So I'm not going to give you your drugs or your alcohol if you don't comply with what I want. And then relationship factors, a really big on-ramp to becoming a trafficking victim, unfortunately, is going to be a prior history of sexual abuse. There are studies that show this. There was a study that came out and it surveyed prostituted women that were from 9 different countries. And there was a question that said, were you sexually abused, before choosing this lifestyle? And the lowest number of women that said yes, they were sexually abused as children was 65%. And then the highest country was 95%. so it's always going to be in the majority. That's always going to be a huge risk factor to continue to possibly be trafficked or enter sex work, I guess is what we call it, or as the world would call it, I guess. So yeah, some examples of vulnerabilities. Sorry, some of this got a little warped here, but some further examples are mental illness, learning disability, prior history of abuse like we mentioned, negative self-esteem, chemical dependency, dysfunction in the home, and homelessness, poverty, LGBTQ+. So again, those are all just some examples of what this could look like. So approximately 3,000 people experience homelessness throughout western Wisconsin, with about 49% being children. So just thinking about that and how a rising tide lifts all ships, and if we were able to really combat homelessness and we were really aware of what this looked like, that could be a way that we really help somebody that would be in a really vulnerable position and doesn't have provision for their needs when they're facing a really cold winter. So that's kind of a vulnerability that we would have locally. And so this really shows a breakdown as well of data of victims. This kind of blew my mind when I saw it, because I kind of assumed that most victims are women. I don't know about you guys, but that was sort of something that I saw not to be true. Well, I guess the majority are, but it's a lot more male victims than I had assumed. So about 51% are adult female, 21% adult male, 20% minor female, and 8% minor male. It is tricky though as well, I think, with the male population, because there is a lot of societal pressure to not be victimized as a male. I think it exists for women too, and it's very hard to come forward, but especially if you add in that, like as a man, like you don't want people to take advantage of you, and it's really hard to come forward no matter who you are. But that's kind of a breakdown that kind of shows just what a victim may look like. So again, people of any age, gender, or ethnicity could be a victim of sex trafficking or exploitation, but those obvious vulnerabilities are the most susceptible to that. So just thinking about that in our communities, like who are those people around us that maybe this is going to be something that they're faced with. This decision of, am I gonna feed my kids, or what am I gonna do? Where's that money gonna come? And obviously with COVID, with the pandemic, with inflation, it's increasing those vulnerabilities, and it's increasing financial dependence on somebody else who might be your abuser. A lot of people maybe are stuck in that situation. So just asking yourself again, what are the vulnerabilities that I have? What are those that are around me? For me, it's probably my loved ones. It's my husband. It's my parents' dogs. It's my family. I shouldn't have said that second. I should have said like my parents. But those people that if somebody threatened their life, I would feel like, well, I'll do anything, really. And so it's just so good to check in with ourselves. Like, what does that look like? And maybe strategize that with the youth in your life. Like, what would that vulnerability look like for them? And just some warning signs to talk through a little bit are that someone might be groomed to trafficking, or that they are a trafficking victim. The barcode or name tattoo, this is a picture of what that can look like. This was a woman that we actually met who's out of Milwaukee. She obviously gave us permission to use that photo, and she's still in the life of trafficking right now. And I think that's why we really want to work on that prevention side, because getting out of this is very difficult. The average amount of time someone will try to leave the life of trafficking is about 7. So they'll just keep going into that cycle, and maybe they are getting a little closer to change, but there's so many factors that keep them from leaving. So again, her trafficker, she had a couple of kids with him. He kind of posed as like a boyfriend, Romeo pimp is what we would call it. And so, I think in her mind, she's thinking, well, this guy really loves me. Of course I'm going to get like his name on my body, because that's like a thing that couples do. But in the pimp's mind, in the trafficker's mind, they think, this is my property. I want everyone who's in the game, who's in the life, to know that. So it's very intentional when they do those tattoos. So signs of abuse, and this could be physical, but it also could be sort of flinching and whatever those telltale signs that someone is being abused would look like. Possible evidence of addiction, like I mentioned, that might be something that is introduced or something that already existed, and then the trafficker's taking advantage of it. They may not be in control of personal documents, and this could even go for work possessions that are valuable. I knew a woman, and she was being controlled by this pimp who had pictures of her mom who had passed away. Like, he had family photos that she didn't have copies of. And that was a way that he kept getting her to come back, and he would reintroduce her to drugs, and that's kind of where it went from there. So it could be personal documents, it could be, and even with labor trafficking, which we haven't really talked about because that's a whole thing, and sometimes that intersects too with sex trafficking. The employer, the person posing as the employer, it's very natural if you give your employer your documents so they can make copies of them. But then, especially if you're a foreign national coming in, where are those copies now? Or where is your license? They took it. And then how are you going to prove who you are? And it's just a whole thing that a trafficker will use. And then they may not talk unless a third party is present. So whoever that controlling person is, and I mentioned the Romeo pimp, but it really could look like so many different people. Familial trafficking is also a threat to be aware of that some children will be dealing with. It could be their parent, it could be their legal guardian, an uncle, someone that is close to them and has access to them. Lots of times that's who the abuser will be when it's a child. It is going to be someone with access to them. So whoever that third party is, they may not be able to speak to you unless they've gotten go-ahead from that person. And then again, they're just not really free to come and go as they wish. They're not independent. So they're not able to make those decisions. Okay, so you can't really see that, but who do you think out of these 4 pictures is the trafficker? The most likely person. You can shout it out if you want to. Guy in the suit, okay? We got 1 vote for him.
Grandma looks a little suspicious.
Grandma? I know. Who's she talking to? I don't know. Does anyone think it could be all of them? Mm-hmm. So it is kind of a trick question, because the answer is it could be all of them. So like I mentioned with familial trafficking, that could be what it looks like. If anyone's familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein case and all that, yeah. So if you want to learn more about that, there is a documentary on Netflix. It's fascinating but awful, but you just learn so much while watching it. And he had created basically a sexual pyramid scheme. So because he was a businessman, he actually he had a home in Palm Beach, Florida, and so he knew that West Palm Beach, it was a little more, I guess, lower, more poverty was there, and so he actually targeted students, high school girl students from West Palm Beach, and he had them basically infiltrate their own high school. So he made a couple connections, he had these girls come to his house, and then he would ask them for a massage, and then it turned very sexual in nature. And so if they would say no, so they either did it or they would basically say no, and then he said, okay, if you don't want to do it, that's fine, but if you get me someone else to do it, another girl to do it, I'll pay you $200. So he got them to recruit in their high school, so they basically became a recruiter and a trafficker in a way. And really unfortunate, because he preyed on people he knew were maybe afraid of him. It wasn't just they wanted money, it was probably they were afraid, maybe they didn't think it was that big of a deal, justified it, I don't know. But again, that's how this can look. And then of course we have that sort of cartoonish pimp that everybody assumes. I think this really speaks though of our culture and how we say things like pimped out. And I always tell my mom, I'm like, Mom, we can't say pimped out anymore. But it's really that's what we always say. And she's like, okay, I'm trying to stop. But it's so common, right? When I talk to the kids in the JDC, I ask them, do you guys think if I said something was hoed out, would you think it was really cool? And they are like, no. And it's, because we subtly buy into this language of you wouldn't think that, a prostitute is cool, but you think a pimp is cool. And I actually had them list the attributes of a pimp. And eventually they started saying slick and, womanizer, like they had a bunch of them. Eventually they got down to like rapist and manipulator, like they got it, you know, they got what a pimp is. But it is positive. I mean, it is seen as something positive in some circles and in our kind of our parlance and how we speak. And then also this businessman, of course, it could, you know, look like a man that is presenting himself as, like doing business, like a Jeffrey Epstein, who has, it's a very lucrative criminal enterprise. And so he's making a lot of money. He's going to present himself as that. So let's transition a little bit more. So we've kind of talked a little bit more generally about human trafficking. I would like to kind of talk a little bit more about how this can look with our cell phones and how this can look online. So, this is kind of an awkward question. Is sexting harmless? And again, for the world that a lot of youth are in right now, like a lot of the kids that are probably in this room, many of you will probably be pressured into sexting at some point, if it hasn't already happened, because it's just so common. It's seen as like as common as trading like Pokemon cards or baseball cards. Is trading nude photos, and that's just the reality of it. And so I think that, again, we have this idea, going to the next slide, that it's sort of harmless or it's not a big deal, but it is a pretty big deal, because when you send a photo or a video to somebody, you have no control over what happens to it after that. They could upload it, they could send it to all their friends, your friends, they could send it to your parents, they could, you know, there's so many avenues that it could go. Also societally, and I mean with the apps that exist out there, like TikTok and things that are really, you know, fun and like in a lot of ways like a positive thing. I mean, we're not saying the internet is just bad, but there are avenues to really start grooming, right? Like grooming kids to think that taking off their clothes for a camera is really normal. There's these kind of, you know, challenges that you can take part in. And it's basically like the more clothes that you take off, the more likes you're going to get. And a lot of times what happens is kids are bored and they're looking for attention. And I mean, all of us can probably relate to that, being that age, and that's kind of what you're looking for. And also prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop till age 25, so those decision-making skills are not 100%, right? And I think that largely we don't see the harm in it, and we don't talk about the harm. But again, this is sort of the culture around like sexting and these apps is it's so normal. You should start marketing your body, making money off of it. I don't know if anyone's heard of OnlyFans. This is a pretty big deal. This is a pay-to-play subscription content-based website. So basically, the age verification out there, by the way, is awful. It's very easy to bypass it. You can pretend that you're 18. You can, you know, get a fake ID. It's really, really easy to do that, to join OnlyFans. And like this girl did a video on how to increase your OnlyFans subscribers. So basically, if you want to see somebody and like them doing like some risque photos or risque videos, you can pay. And like you pay like, I don't know if it's monthly or just like an extra like a couple $100, and they will create a private like sexy video for you. And again, a lot of this could be, this girl in this video, she could be 18, she looked like she was probably 14. And in the video too, she is talking to a man before she starts filming. So it just, of course, because of what I do, I'm immediately thinking like, oh, who is that guy? Like, who's the guy that's in the room kind of watching her film this? Could be a trafficker, could be a boyfriend who's posing as a trafficker. And that's the thing is, we don't even know. We don't know if she's consensually there. Because that person could have, hey, I have this image of you, I have this whatever of you, and you better start doing OnlyFans and making us money, right? So they could be getting a cut of it, or they could even pose as like, I'm going to help you make more money off OnlyFans. And so then these even younger women are really just getting very economically dependent on something like OnlyFans. But then what's hard is they have to maintain their followers, and they have to, they're used to getting $10,000 a month, they have to keep doing enough things where otherwise that follower could just go to the next person and say, well, they'll do this, like they'll do this thing that I want to see. If you won't do it, they will. And they can also do screen recording, so they can have this video of you forever. So it's really, I know, I'm sorry, this is a lot, but it's so good to talk about this because I don't think it's seen for really what it is, which is ultimately you're giving the keys to your life really to a stranger. I mean, they could potentially have so much control over you. And then if we want to talk a little bit about, next slide, revenge porn is the distribution of sexually explicit images or videos of individuals without their consent. So this is pretty common practice as well. So basically, you know, let's say two kids are in high school and they break up, you know, they are sharing photos, they're sexting, because again, very normal to do that. I mean, it's just because, I should say it's common, it's not normal, but it's very common practice to do. And basically what happens is then that they break up and then that person who's scorned, they may put that out there, they may put that content out there without the consent of that victim. And 90% of the revenge porn victims in the study that I found, 90% were women, 93% said that they had suffered significant emotional distress due to being a victim, 49% said that they have been harassed or stalked online by users who saw their material. So again, going back to trafficking, it's a sexual act that is taken by force, threat, or coercion for commercial exploitation. So there's money, there's whatever is exchanged for it, but there's coercion that's used. So even the threat of revenge porn could be enough, right, for someone to comply. And then sextortion is really a form of blackmail in which sexual information or images are used to extort sexual favors from the victim. So those two can go hand in hand, sextortion. So yeah, if you want to go to the next one, the FBI has seen a horrific increase in reports of financial sextortion schemes targeting minor boys. And the fact is that many victims who are afraid to come forward are not even included in those numbers. So this is something that is really coming into, like, there's more attention being drawn to this. And this has apparently been really aimed at minor boys. Like we talked about, it's not always going to be female victims. This is something that's on the rise. Go to the next one. Under Wisconsin's child pornography law, an adult or minor who knowingly possesses or views a visual depiction of a child engaged in sexually explicit content, so sexual or lewd depictions sent via text message, can face felony charges. So this is even something that kids need to be aware of, youth need to be aware of, that even though this is very much commonplace in your peers and what you're doing, if somebody, you know, has a photo of a child engaged in sexually explicit content, like this could be a felony. This could permanently go on your record. And this is why we even say, like, if, you know, you as a parent come across something and maybe you have like software that helps you monitor, you know, do not send it, do not keep scrolling, don't do any of that. Just make sure that you report it right away, because you don't, as the parent, want to be held responsible for any of that. Like, why didn't you get help within the 8-hour window? And unfortunately, it's because you're the adult in that situation. Like, the blame's gonna kind of go on you for that if you're not going to be seeking help after you knew about it. So again, that's something we can talk about after for Q&A if you have questions. But yeah, so this is pretty serious, and there can be some consequences that will impact that child for the rest of their life, really, or that individual. And then another kind of, I think my goal in this is really showing how things are marketed very, like they're not a big deal, and then really telling you the truth of what it is and what it can look like. So this is something, being a sugar baby, is something that a lot of times high schoolers or even college students are really targeted for. So there was, I think in the last 5 years, a 350% increase to seekingarrangements.com, where if you have a college edu address, email address, and you enter, you get automatically added to Sugar Baby University if you go on arrangementoffenders.com. And so you can put your debt in there and it will count it off. So let's say that you go on a date that they set you up with, you make $2,000, it'll show how that debt is slowly getting smaller, so you feel really good about it. So that's, again, marketed largely. There's all these like websites and all these little, there's all these little pages that are like 5 places to take your sugar baby or your sugar daddy. And it's sort of seen as this equal exchange of I'm getting something, they're getting something. I don't have to have, like, I don't don't have to have sex with them, like that's not on the table. So the truth of it, so the bitter truth of sugaring is that money or gifts are really leveraged. So if there was choice in the beginning, those money or that money that was given or gifts are really held over the head of the person. Many on the website, like I said, with OnlyFans or seeking arrangements, may have a third-party controller or trafficker, but we would never know that. That person who is the trafficker may pose as like, yeah, I'll help you reach more people, right? That's how they get their cuts. And again, it's just directly supporting the culture of people with money having access to young men or women's bodies and normalizing it further. So yeah, it's basically like if you have money, you can have this this person that is sort of your arm candy. But again, too, there's even these forums where these like sugar daddies are talking. I mean, there's sugar mamas too. It's not just sugar daddies, but they're talking about how basically you can get the most and give the least. So making sure that you go to their apartment so you know where they live, like things like that. Find a college student, things like there's ways that they are discussing on these forums how to get the best experience, and they'll even like rate sugar babies on there. It's pretty gross. So that's kind of what that looks like. And again, you know, runaway and homeless youth can enter into those relationships, but like I said, it could even be a college student who has a lot of financial pressure and debt. So with those much older partners, and then could be gifts, funds, or necessities that they are receiving. So that was according to 2017 Murphy study. Oh, can you go back really quick? So, sorry, Chris. So the next part, and I know this is a lot of information, and again, like I said, we do have some handouts if you want to kind of take those with you. It's just kind of about internet safety in general. The next portion, I want to take a little bit of what we've talked about and kind of, this is like the road test of the night. So we created a video, and it's called Dear Diary, and it's available on YouTube if you want to go find it later. And it really does show what it can look like for a young girl, young teen, to be groomed again from their bedroom. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that together. We'll show a little bit of the video. I'm going to ask you guys some questions. We'll show, and so we'll kind of watch it all together. So yeah, we'll roll it.
Today was the worst day. All of the kids in my Spanish class started making fun of me when I stuttered asking the teacher to go to the bathroom. And my crush since 8th grade, Ricky, also joined in. And so did Sonia, my ex-best friend, who doesn't even sit with me at lunch now. What made it worse is that my mom forgot to pick me up from school again, so I had to call her from the office. I think it's because my dad's been drinking again. I heard them arguing late last night. I just wish they would get a divorce. I feel like they don't even care about it. When they're yelling, I grab my dog Pepper and I listen to music just to try and block it all out. And then sometimes when I'm mad, I go on this online game and talk to some of my friends on there. They don't care about my stutter. They just care that I kill all the bad guys. Thanks for listening, DJ.
Okay, so what were some vulnerabilities that you saw DJ talking about in real life?
Lack of friends.
What was that? Sorry.
Lack of friends and friends with them.
Yeah, she didn't have really a supportive peer network at school. So yeah, she didn't have a lot of friends. She was getting made fun of for her stutter. Any other ones you guys heard? Yeah, same. Yeah, not a great home life. Her parents are fighting a lot. Hinted at her dad's alcoholism, right? And therefore self-esteem, yeah, definitely. Definitely doesn't have like a great time at home or at school. So she's feeling not great about herself probably. Other thoughts? Online gaming, yeah, that's kind of a sneakier one. She goes online to feel validated and loved. like we talked about, that's kind of vulnerability. I think we know. So yeah, looking for love and acceptance. Distant relationship with parents. And she lacks the support of peer network. So you guys named all of those. So for the next part, we are going to look at what that grooming process began to look like for you.
Dear Diary, it's been a while since I last wrote you, and that's because after the last entry, I met someone. His name is Cole, and he popped up in my gaming server telling me he really liked my profile picture. I think he's the one. We talked every night since then, and we have so much in common. He added me on Snapchat, and he's giving me gaming tokens, and he sent me a beautiful bracelet in the mail. He is so cute. He's older, 20, and he has his own car, and he said that I'm the most beautiful girl that he's ever talked to, and that he wants to be my boyfriend. I told him about the kids at school, and he said that they didn't matter, and then I told him about my parents fighting, and he said he'd always be there for me. I feel like I can tell him anything. He said he really wants to be with me, and he's saving money for the future, our future. And I can't wait, because all I want is to be with him. Tonight, we're video chatting for the first time. He said he's really excited to see what I look like. He hinted that he wanted to see me in my underwear, but I'm kind of nervous because I've never really done that before. But I feel like that's what boyfriends and girlfriends do, and I just want to make him happy. But my parents would freak out if they found out, so I've got to keep it a secret. Love, DJ.
Okay, so what were some of those grooming tactics that you saw Cole maybe beginning to use on her?
Buying her things.
Yeah, buying her things. So he bought her a bracelet. He also gave her cryptocurrency, so digital currency. And something someone pointed out when I showed this was the fact that he knew where she lived because he sent it to her address. So he now had her address and her location when he sent her the bracelet. And that's sort of like, we wouldn't think about that, right? Any other thoughts?
He's building up her self-esteem too.
Yes, building up her self-esteem. What were you saying?
Supporting her
Yeah, that was pretty key. Like, I'm the only one that understands you. And I think in a healthy relationship, you want to support that person, but you also want them to have other healthy relationships, like not just you. And he's trying to build out that isolation further with her. So it's just the two of them. Like, it's just you and me against the world kind of thing. And I guess when you're that age, I mean, it feels very romantic, right? Like, it's sort of like, oh, wow, you know, he wants to be with just me, he's older, like, oh my gosh, that'd be so petty. Like, if I was that age, oh my gosh, you know. So, yep, false promises to meet her needs. Emotionally, he sent her gifts, like you mentioned. Isolates her from her peers, you mentioned. And then also test the waters by asking her for nude photos. So that could be something where he's seeing, will she go forward with this? If she doesn't do that, then he might wait a little more time. He might try a couple more tactics on her, but yeah, seeing if she'll comply with that, even though she's not comfortable doing it, she's never done it before. So for the next part, and this is the most intense part of the video, but this really does show, again, what this can kind of culminate in and what this is all leading towards, which is exploitation.
Dear Diary, I'm so scared. Something has gone terribly wrong. After Cole and I video chatted, I felt kind of icky, and then he didn't message me. I felt like I did something wrong. Maybe he didn't even like me. And then he messaged me saying he missed me and he had a great idea. I was so relieved. I asked him what he meant, and he said he had a friend in the area who thought I was super hot and wanted to hang out. He would give Cole and I $500. I was confused because I thought Cole was my boyfriend, but he just said, yeah, well, you wouldn't have to do anything, just hang out with him. And then afterwards we could still go on a romantic date. You're still my beautiful girl. Don't you want us to be together? And of course I did, but this just seemed kind of weird. But Cole helped me come up with an excuse. We said I was staying at a friend's house, and It wasn't hard to lie to my parents because they didn't even know how miserable I was at school. Cole drove into town and picked me up. I couldn't believe that I was finally meeting him, and we were driving to meet another guy. We got to the sketchy hotel and booked a room. The concierge looked a little confused, but didn't say anything. Once we got to the room, I started getting nervous. Cole gave me a glass of wine, telling me to drink it, saying it would loosen me up. I wanted to call my mom, but I left my phone in the car because Cole said I wouldn't need it. We waited there for about 15 minutes and then his friend showed up. I thought he would be closer to our age, but he was older, like my dad's age. I was so confused, but when I got up to leave, Cole cornered me. His eyes looked so dark and he told me that I couldn't leave the room until he was happy. I was so embarrassed, so I just nodded my head. Then Cole left me there with this guy for like an hour. He took my clothes off and touched me everywhere. I was too scared to leave because of what Cole said, so I just let it happen. I couldn't believe that this was my first time. Afterwards, all I could do was cry. Cole came in, wiped my tears, and said, "Good job, baby, I'm proud of you." He grabbed the money off the table and asked me if I wanted to go to dinner. I shook my head no, so he just drove me home. I never wanted to speak to him again, but he popped up on my messenger that night. I told him I never wanted to do that again, but that's when he got ugly. He told me that he knew where I lived and that he'd hurt my dog and my parents if I didn't do what he told me. He also told me that he had pictures of me naked that he would post online. He called me damaged goods and said that since I wasn't a virgin anymore, I might as well keep doing this and making us money. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared of him. I don't know how to get out of this except to keep doing what he wants so he doesn't hurt my family. I never want them to find out about this. They would disown me. DJ.
So, what were some of those control tactics and why did DJ feel like she had no other choice but to stay?
Threats to her family and dog.
Right. Threats to her family, the ones that she loved, yeah.
Her reputation, the pictures.
Yeah. Her reputation and the ease of posting that online and embarrassing her and, humiliating her. Yeah. Those are pretty strong ones. Any other thoughts?
Damaged goods.
Yeah, saying she was damaged goods, like shame, and saying like basically putting that shame on her, that she should, keep doing it because why should she not, do it if she's already damaged goods? Yeah, exactly. So he began by establishing that romantic connection with her, so she trusted him and she went on that date even though it's like, wait, we're meeting another guy, I'm really confused, but I'm going to go with it. Again, he threatened to reveal evidence of their sexual activity on videos that he had, or photos that he had, saying they're damaged goods, like you mentioned. So that's, those are some pretty strong ties of, somebody, even, let's take away the fact that she's probably, 15? I mean, how many of us would be in a situation as an adult like that and feel very trapped and not know how to both get out of that situation? So some of those long-term effects of trafficking that can look like, in manifest is suicidal ideation. That's just common that begins to happen. You feel very despairing, like you can't get out of it. PTSD, dissociative identity disturbance, so kind of out of body, like your brain is trying to protect you, so you may have blocks of memory that is completely gone. Substance abuse, like we mentioned, STDs, STIs, anxiety and depression, those are just some of those long-term effects of trafficking that can happen. So I have talked a lot about trafficking, and you guys did such a great job with that video of identifying grooming and vulnerability. I wanted to introduce to you the man who's been doing the slides this whole night, Chris Page. He's going to tell you a little bit more about the program that Fierce Freedom has for students that we we want to share a little bit more about that with you right now. So.
Anytime a guy came to and from the trailer, I was expected to provide any sexual service or favor that they wanted. No matter what it was, I had no choice in the matter. I knew that my life was over. The way that I had experienced life was never going to be the same.
How is everybody doing tonight? Let's go with the thumb test. If you're like, wow, this is a great way to spend a Monday night, you get thumbs up. Go thumbs to the side if you're like, I'm happy to know this information, but oh, wow, this is pretty intense. And thumbs down with like, I did not know what I was getting myself into. I should have stayed home and done something else. All right, so give me your thumb, show me your thumb test. All right. Well, I am glad that you are here, and I do find that this is a valuable way to spend a Monday night or any night. It's a lot of hard, heavy stuff, and we, like Kat said at the start, we don't want to leave you feeling like this is a hopeless situation, because we don't believe it's a hopeless situation. We believe that there are steps that we can take as people now aware of the issue to share with others that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, and to take steps to change the culture and to change our communities, because as Kat mentioned, all of our communities are affected by this. It's a problem that happens around the world, around the country, big cities, small communities, in our schools, all over the place. My name is Chris Page, and I am the Worth It Program Specialist. That is a new program that we have been developing over the past couple of years, and the goal of the program is to go into high schools, was how it was originally conceived, to go into high schools and share with high school students that this is an issue that they might run into if they haven't already run into. And then what can we do to step into this battle against human trafficking? How can we start to change the culture? How can we start to change our schools? Now, one of the things that we will cover in the Worth It program for high schools is you saw the video for kind of our advertisement for it. That is our friend Amanda, and she willingly shared her story of being trafficked here in Wisconsin, right? She's from here.
It was in the U.S., but I don't think it was in Wisconsin,
Okay.
but it's a couple states away.
It's pretty close by, yeah. So, and it is a story about how her life changed with this experience of being trafficked. And we will share that story with the high school students so they get a picture of what this can look like in our communities. We will also go into some details about, like Kat covered earlier, what trafficking is, how it involves a victim, an abuser, and a buyer, and also what exploitation is, because it can be a really slippery slope to be in a place where you are vulnerable to exploitation, and eventually that can lead to a trafficking situation. So these are some things that we will cover with the high school students, sharing with them what these things can look like so that they start to gain awareness in their schools so that they can start to take steps into being part of the solution. Now, in Amanda's story, what helps her out is a friend kind of comes across and notices that she's going through a hard situation and says, you know, how can I help? And chooses to take steps to help in her situation and ultimately helps her get out of the hard situation that she is in. And so we want to encourage students to be ready to be that friend. If they come across somebody in their circle of influence, their close friends, of course they're going to want to step in and help out. If they come across somebody that they barely know, but they see that something is going on in that person's life, we want to encourage them to know that they can be part of making a change in somebody's hard story. We'll also talk with them about what makes a healthy relationship and what makes an unhealthy relationship, just so they can start to identify some of those pieces that they might be experiencing in their relationships, not just in dating relationships, but also within friendships, with parent and child relationships, with teacher and student relationships, just identifying the marks of a healthy relationship and what to watch for in those unhealthy relationships that could lead to situations where they're being exploited or trafficked. And through those conversations that we had as we started the Worth It program, we thought, well, this is great. This would be great to get into high schools and share with them what it is that they might be running into. But how amazing would it be if we could start having these conversations about changing culture at an even earlier age? And so we've also been developing Worth It Elementary, where we are building strong communities through relationship and action. Now, with our elementary program, we do not go into any details of what human trafficking looks like at all. The whole goal of the elementary program is to encourage students to start to develop the habits of thinking, you know what? I'm pretty great. And you know what? People around me, they're pretty great too. We want to help them develop habits of knowing that they are worth dignity, respect, and kindness, and help them develop habits of showing respect, dignity, and kindness to others. Now, to help us in the elementary programs, we do have a superhero-based program that we are running, and the idea is that the students that hear this can be superheroes in this battle against, in this battle to create good, safe, healthy environments. And how do they do that? Well, they join the VOPED Society. How many of you have ever heard of the VOPED Society? None of you, because we made it up. But here's what it stands for. It stands for, we are encouraging kids to be superheroes by valuing other people every day. Every day you have the choice of whether you're going to be kind to somebody or be mean to somebody. Every day you have the choice if you're going to help somebody or if you're going to hurt somebody. And the truth is, some days we choose to hurt people. But you know what? The next day is a brand new day where we get to make the choice again. And hopefully, as we continue to encourage them in seeing others and seeing their own value, then more days they will choose to be helpful and to be those safe people for the others in their community. Now, like any good superhero story, we need a villain. And our villain, Masquerade, he's really tricky. He'll try two different things at the same time. He will say to some, you are better than others and you don't need to associate with them. And he will tell other people you are not worth anything and you should hide from other people. And everybody will be invited to put on a mask and keep their true feelings and their true selves hidden from everybody else. And that makes our communities a community that is not very strong, that is weak, and that is going to be a place where exploitation can thrive. And so we want to value other people, and we want to create these strong communities of people who know each other, people who care for each other, and people who watch out for each other. And if we can start these conversations in our elementary schools and continue them on through our middle schools and through our high schools, then maybe, just maybe, we can start to make a dent in this world of trafficking that we are seeing growing every day. And I want to leave you with these couple of stories. On the top, we have Ryan. We're gonna call it Hurlajack. All right.
Ryan H.
Ryan H. And at the age of 6 years old in school, he learned about the water crisis in the country of Uganda. And he couldn't believe that there were kids his age somewhere in the world who couldn't rely on having water every day. Or they had to get up and before school walk for 2 hours to get the water that they need for the day and come back. And so he said, what can I do? And he started doing extra chores around his house to earn money to donate for an organization that was building wells that he had heard about through his school. But he decided that wasn't enough. He continued to raise money by doing chores and by telling people about what he had learned. And at the age of 10, along with his parents, he formed the Ryan's Well Foundation that to this day has helped 1.3 million people have access to water. And he partners with schools in a bunch of different ways to encourage them to further this mission. I also want you to meet Iqbal Maseh. Practice that. He is from Pakistan, and at the age of 4, because his mother had a vulnerability, she had a surgery that she needed, and she could not afford to pay it. And so the end result was he was sold into the carpet industry to work 12-hour days tied to a loom. And some days he would get to go on deliveries, delivering carpets to various parts of his town in Pakistan. And at the age of 10, so for you math majors, that's 6 years of living as a slave in the carpet industry in Pakistan. At the age of 10, he escaped and started sharing his story. And his story started to get more widespread, and he was invited to conferences where he would share what was going on, and people started to take action against the child slavery issue in that part of the world. Now ultimately, he passed away. I don't remember what year it was that he died, but he died. He was actually murdered by the carpet cartel in Pakistan, is the heavily held rumor. But he had made such a difference that starting in 2009, the United States Congress started to give the Iqbal Maseh Award in his memory to anybody who was making significant difference in child labor issues around the world. Now, why do I share these two stories with you? Well, I had to pick two from a whole bunch of them that I looked up in a quick Google search. The reason that I want to share these stories with you is because we want to start talking to kids in elementary schools about what their value is and how important they are as part of our society. And we're going to help them learn to see others around them as important members of our culture. And I believe that stories like this are encouraging because I don't want to be one who puts limits on the impact that children can have in changing our culture and in changing our society. And so I believe that as we start to have these conversations at these young ages, we're going to see amazing things happen in our schools, in our communities, in our country, and around the world. It will have an impact on the issue of human trafficking. So thank you very much for coming here tonight. You will see our fiercefreedom.org is our website. Please come and check out what we've got going on there. You can follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram to learn more about the things that we do at Fierce Freedom. And if you have any questions, we can take them now, or you can come to our table.
Just one little quick thing, because I know we're at our time, but we do have a few things. If you do want to check out our resource table, again, they're all online. One of them is like a contract checklist of expectations that you can develop as a family when we're talking about safe phone use. So it has some ideas there. It also has some best practices for parents discussing online safety. And one just quick thing I wanted to add, with the Worth It program, there is also something for parents and teachers also. It's called Fierce Parenting. So it's basically, like, I talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and it basically is going to break down every week because we don't want to just like overwhelm everyone with information. We want to have every week it's designed to go through and learn a little bit more about some of the threats that your child may be facing. We talk about sugaring, we talk about other forms of exploitation. So, and again, we also focus on wellness. This is something that, again, I can see a lot of you, it's a lot. And I want everyone to just know that you just have to do that one thing. So just think, and maybe that's something that this is just starting a fire in you a little bit. there are so many gaps that exist. There's so much of this that exists, but there's immeasurable ways to fill those gaps and to play a part. And I want everyone to like take care of yourself tonight and just go and take what we've talked about and make sure that, if you want to talk to us, we're here to chat more with you. But yeah, it's heavy stuff and we realize that, but we're so grateful that you all showed up. We're also grateful because we know that you're each part of what is going to make a culture change. And just a little thought to leave you with from William Wilberforce, who was instrumental in ending the transatlantic slave trade. He said you may choose to look the other way, but you never say again that you did not know. So again, I hope that all of you will take something that we've talked about today, maybe put that into practice in your life, feel empowered that you can make a change. All of us standing here, we all were inspired. We all wanted to join this fight. All of you have a part to play. Jenny, our boss, she heard about this in 2007 and she was like, not on my watch. And so she started Fierce Freedom. So not all of us have to start a Fierce Freedom, but what does that look like for you? We just want to empower you towards that. So yeah, that's all from us. So thank you guys again so much, and feel free to check out our resources and ask us whatever questions we're here for you. So thank you all again.